Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I moved in with these two roommates about 8 months ago when I got my first job out of college. The apartment was decent, rent was split 3 ways, and I figured living with other people my age would be fun. The place came with one shared bathroom between the three of us. No big deal, I thought. We're all adults here. We can figure out how to keep a bathroom clean, right? Well, turns out I was the only one who thought that way. It started small. I'd noticed the sink had toothpaste splatters after my first roommate brushed his teeth. He works in IT and spends most of his time gaming when he's not at the office. Nice enough guy. But apparently cleaning wasn't part of his skill set. My other roommate is this girl who's always talking about her yoga classes and organic smoothies, but somehow that healthy lifestyle doesn't extend to basic hygiene maintenance. At first, I just wiped down the sink when I used it. No big deal. Then I started noticing hair in the shower drain. Long hair, short hair, just clumps of it sitting there making the water back up. I pull it out because standing in ankle-deep dirty water while trying to shower is gross. Pretty soon, I was the one scrubbing the toilet bowl because nobody else seemed to notice when it got dirty. I was the one replacing the toilet paper when it ran out. I was the one cleaning the mirror when it got covered in water spots and toothpaste spray. I was the one washing the shower curtain when it started getting that weird mildew smell. This went on for months. Every single week I'd spend my Saturday morning cleaning that bathroom top to bottom while my roommates slept in or went about their business. I tried dropping hints at first. I suggested that the bathroom was getting pretty gross and maybe we should set up some kind of cleaning schedule. Both of them agreed that it was a great idea and we should definitely do that. But nothing ever happened. A week would go by, the bathroom would be disgusting again, and I'd be back in there with rubber gloves and bleach. I tried being more direct. I brought up the cleaning schedule we had talked about. The IT guy said he'd been super busy with a project at work. The yoga girl gave the same excuse, saying her instructor certification program was taking up so much time. More weeks passed, more cleaning, more excuses. I started feeling like their personal maid, and it was getting old fast. These people were my age, living on their own, paying rent just like me. Why was I the only one who seemed to care about living in a clean space? The breaking point came on a Sunday morning. I walked into the bathroom and it looked like a disaster zone. There was toothpaste crusted all over the sink, hair clogging the drain so bad that there was still standing water from someone's shower the night before, and the toilet looked like it hadn't been cleaned in weeks. Which it hadn't because I'd been the one cleaning it every week and I'd skipped the previous weekend. I stood there and something just snapped. I was done. If they wanted to live like animals, fine. But I wasn't going to enable it anymore, so I stopped. Not just the cleaning, I stopped using the bathroom entirely. I've been going to the gym every morning before work anyway, so I just started showering there instead. I moved my toothbrush to the kitchen and brushed my teeth at the sink in there. When I needed to use the bathroom during the day, I'd hold it until I got to work or stop by this coffee shop down the street that had decent restrooms. My work schedule made this easier than it sounds. I'm in sales and I work long hours, often not getting home until after 8 or 9 at night. By then, I'd just brush my teeth in the kitchen, wash my face there too, and go straight to bed. On weekends, I'd time my errands around public restrooms. My roommates didn't notice it first. Why would they? They'd never paid attention to bathroom maintenance before, so they weren't going to start paying attention to bathroom usage patterns. But after 2 weeks of nobody cleaning and me not using it, that bathroom became a biohazard. The shower curtain had black spots of mold growing on it. The toothpaste in the sink had hardened into these gross, crusty chunks. There were hair clumps everywhere in the drain, on the floor, stuck to the walls of the shower. The toilet had developed this ring around the bowl that looked like it might be permanent. The whole room smelled like a swamp. Part of me was enjoying watching it get worse and worse. Every time I walked past the bathroom door, I'd peek in and see how much more disgusting it had gotten. It was like a science experiment in how gross two people could make a space when left to their own devices. The IT guy cracked. I was in the kitchen making coffee before work when he shuffled out of his room looking defeated. He asked if I could clean the bathroom because it was absolutely disgusting in there. I told him I thought we were taking turns and that I hadn't even been using it. The silence that followed was beautiful. You could practically see the gears turning in his head. He stood there for a good 30 seconds, just staring at me. He asked if I really hadn't been using the bathroom at all. I explained that I've been showering at the gym and brushing my teeth in the kitchen. I told him that since nobody wanted to help clean it, I figured I'd just opt out entirely. More silence. Then the yoga girl emerged from her room, probably wondering what was taking so long. She asked what was going on. The IT guy told her that I hadn't been using the bathroom at all for 2 weeks. She seemed confused and asked what he meant by that. I explained that I hadn't set foot in there since I stopped cleaning it. I said it seemed easier than being the only one who cared about hygiene. You could see the exact moment they realized they'd have to clean their own mess for once. They spent the next 4 hours cleaning that bathroom. I could hear them gagging and complaining through the walls. I'm pretty sure they had to throw out the old shower curtain entirely and buy a new one. When they were finally done, the IT guy knocked on my door. He told me the bathroom was clean now and that they were going to try to keep it that way. I said that sounded good. They actually have kept it cleaner. It's not perfect. I still find the occasional hair in the drain or toothpaste spot on the mirror, but it's a far cry from the swamp it used to be. They alternate weeks now without me having to ask, and neither of them has tried to stick me with all the cleaning again. Turns out when you're the one who has to clean up your own mess, you're a lot more motivated to not make such a big mess in the first place. When I first got hired at this accounting firm I work at, I was desperate for any job that would help me pay off my student loans. The company has this weird culture where they never directly tell you that you have to work overtime. Instead, they use these vague phrases like "we appreciate dedication" and "going above and beyond is noticed." During my interview, my boss made it clear that while overtime wasn't mandatory, employees who showed initiative were the ones who got promoted. I was young and eager, so I bought into it completely. For the first 2 years, I stayed late almost every night. I'd work until 7 or 8, sometimes even 9 o'clock, thinking it would pay off. I watched other employees leave at 5 sharp while I sat there crunching numbers and finishing reports that could have easily waited until the next day. My boss would walk by my desk around 6 and give me this approving nod, like I was doing something special. But the promotions never came. The raises were minimal. Meanwhile, I was missing dinners with friends, skipping weekend plans, and basically living at the office. My girlfriend at the time broke up with me because I was never available. That's when I realized I was being played. About 6 months ago, I decided to change my approach. I started leaving at exactly 5 o'clock unless there was a genuine emergency. My boss didn't like it, but he couldn't say anything directly because technically, my contract said that my hours were 9 to 5. He'd make these passive-aggressive comments about commitment and team players, but I just ignored them. Last Tuesday was particularly crazy. We had a major client deadline coming up, and 2 of our team members had called in sick. By lunchtime, it was obvious we were going to be behind. The office was in chaos, with people running around trying to cover the extra work. Around 4:30, my boss stopped by my desk. He had this stressed look on his face, and I could tell he wanted to ask me to stay late. But instead of being direct about it, he pulled his usual trick. He started by mentioning how behind we were with the 2 people who called out sick. I agreed that it had been a hectic day. Then he told me I was free to use my personal judgment on whether to stay that night. He said we could really use the help, but he wasn't going to force anyone to stay. I almost laughed. This was classic him. He wanted me to stay late, but he didn't want to actually ask me to do it. That way, if I said no, he could act like it was my choice, and if I stayed, he could take credit for my dedication without having to pay me overtime or acknowledge that he basically demanded it. I told him I'd think about it. He said he was sure I'd make the right decision and walked away with this smug look like he'd just pulled off some masterful manipulation. I sat there for a few minutes watching the clock tick toward 5. Other employees were packing up their things, getting ready to leave. A couple of the newer hires looked uncertain, probably wondering if they should stay. At exactly 5 o'clock, I shut down my computer, grabbed my jacket, and headed for the door. When I walked past my boss's office, I could see him through the glass window. He was on the phone, probably trying to figure out how to handle the workload. I called out goodnight to him and said I'd see him tomorrow. He looked up surprised, but I was already walking away. I heard him end his phone call abruptly, but I didn't stick around to see his reaction. The next morning I got to work at my usual time. I was barely at my desk for 5 minutes when my boss appeared, looking frustrated and confused. He asked me if I had actually left the night before, sounding shocked. I confirmed that I had left at 5 like I always did. He said we were so behind and that he thought I would stay to help out. I reminded him that he told me to use my personal judgment, and my personal judgment told me to go home. He got flustered and said that wasn't what he meant, and I knew it. I pointed out that was exactly what he had said, that I was free to use my personal judgment on whether to stay, so I did. He stood there for a moment, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He clearly wanted to yell at me, but he couldn't because technically I had done exactly what he told me to do. He'd been trying to manipulate me into working for free, and I'd called his bluff. He complained that they really needed me the night before, and that the client presentation wasn't ready. I suggested that maybe he should have asked me directly to stay instead of leaving it up to my personal judgment. He said he shouldn't have to ask and that I should know when the team needs me. I reminded him that my contract clearly said 9 to 5 hours, and if he needed me to work different hours, that was something we should discuss officially. He walked off without another word. I could hear him slamming drawers in his office for the next hour. By lunch, there was a new email in everyone's inbox. The subject line was in all caps, "Mandatory overtime this week." The message was short and to the point. Due to client deadlines, all employees were required to work until at least 7 o'clock for the rest of the week. No exceptions. I forwarded the email to HR with a note asking about overtime compensation policies. Within an hour, I got a call from the HR director asking me to come to her office. She said she saw I had some questions about the overtime policy. I told her I was wondering about compensation and whether we'd be getting paid time and a half for the mandatory overtime. She said that depended on my classification and asked if I was exempt or non-exempt. I told her I was non-exempt because I had checked my employee handbook. She looked uncomfortable and started shuffling through some papers. She said she'd look into it and get back to me. 2 hours later, there was another email. This one was much more carefully worded. The mandatory overtime had been changed to requested overtime, and they were offering pizza for anyone who stayed late. My boss avoided eye contact with me for the rest of the week. 3 other employees came up to me privately and thanked me. Apparently, they'd been dealing with the same manipulation for years, but were too scared to push back. Now that someone had called out the boss's tactics, they felt more confident standing up for themselves too. I still work there, but things are different now. My boss has to be much more direct about overtime requests, and when he does ask, he makes sure to mention compensation. I have lived in my grandfather's old house for some years now. He left it to me when he passed away, and I slowly fix it up while working 2 jobs to make ends meet. The house isn't fancy, but it's mine, and I put everything I have into making it livable. My aunt has always been a problem. She is my dad's sister, and she spent most of her adult life bouncing from one family member's couch to another. She never keeps a job for more than a few months and always has some excuse for why she can't pay rent or contribute to household expenses. My parents got tired of her drama and told her she couldn't stay with them anymore about 6 months ago. That's when she started calling me. At first, it was just casual conversation, asking how I was doing with the house and my jobs. Then she started dropping hints about how hard it was to find affordable housing and how family should help each other out. I saw where this was going, but I tried to be polite about it. The thing is, I'm barely scraping by myself. I work at the grocery store during the day and do delivery driving at night. Every penny I make goes toward the mortgage, utilities, and the endless repairs this old house needs. I don't have room in my budget for another person, especially someone who doesn't contribute. Last month, she showed up at my door with 2 suitcases and a sob story about being evicted from her latest place. She begged me to let her stay for just a few days while she figured things out, claiming she wouldn't ask if she wasn't desperate. She reminded me that she had helped change my diapers when I was little and said the least I could do was help her out when she was down on her luck. I felt guilty, so I agreed to let her sleep on my couch for 1 week. 1 week turned into 2, then 3. She wasn't looking for work or making any effort to find her own place. Instead, she was treating my house like a hotel. She'd leave dishes everywhere, use up all my groceries, and complain about everything from the water pressure to the temperature. The final straw came when I found her moving her stuff into my spare bedroom without asking. When I confronted her about what she was doing, she told me she was getting settled in because the couch was killing her back. She said she figured since I wasn't using the room anyway, she might as well make herself comfortable. I reminded her that I never said she could move in permanently and that we had agreed this was temporary. She got defensive and asked where else she was supposed to go. She said I couldn't just kick family out on the street and accused me of being selfish for keeping all this space to myself when she needed help. I apologized but told her that she needed to find somewhere else to stay. I gave her until the end of the week to make arrangements. She started screaming about how ungrateful I was and how my grandfather would be ashamed of me for not helping family. She said I owed her because she had helped take care of him before he died, which wasn't even true. She'd visited him maybe 3 times in his last 5 years. I stood my ground and told her she had to leave. She walked out. 3 days later, I came home from my morning shift to find my front door wide open. I could hear crashing sounds coming from inside the house. I ran in and found her in the spare bedroom with a sledgehammer, putting holes in the walls. I shouted at her to stop and asked what she was doing. She yelled back that if she couldn't live there, then nobody could. She said I wanted to be selfish, so fine, and told me to see how I liked living in a destroyed house. She had already put several large holes in the drywall and was working on making them bigger. Pieces of wall and insulation were scattered everywhere. I demanded that she stop right then because she was destroying my house. She screamed that it should have been hers anyway because she was older than my dad, so she should have inherited the place instead of some ungrateful kid who wouldn't even help family. I pulled out my phone and called the police while she continued swinging the hammer. She saw me on the phone and got even more angry. She told me to go ahead and call him because she would tell them how I had been abusing an elderly family member and refusing to provide basic shelter. I pointed out that she wasn't elderly at 52 and that I wasn't required to house her for free. When the police arrived, she tried to play the victim. She claimed I had locked her out of the house where she'd been living and that she was just trying to get her belongings. But the evidence was pretty clear. There was a sledgehammer in her hands and several $1,000s worth of damage to my walls. The officers asked me if I wanted to press charges. I hesitated for a moment because she was family, but then I looked at the destruction she'd caused to the house I've been working so hard to fix up. I told them yes, I wanted to press charges. They arrested her for destruction of property and trespassing. When they were putting her in the police car, she was still yelling at me. She said I would regret this and that nobody in the family would ever speak to me again. She screamed that I was dead to them. When my parents heard what happened, they were horrified but not surprised. Apparently, she'd pulled similar stunts with other family members over the years. My dad apologized for not warning me about how destructive she could get when she didn't get her way. The damage to my house cost me almost $3,000 to repair, money I definitely didn't have. I had to take out a small loan and work extra shifts for months to pay it off. But at least I learned that sometimes you have to protect yourself, even from family. She was sentenced to community service and ordered to pay a restitution, though I'm not holding my breath on ever seeing that money. She's been telling anyone who will listen that I'm a terrible person who abandoned family in their time of need. But I've noticed that none of those people have offered to let her move in with them either. The house is fixed now and I've changed the locks. After my divorce was finalized 3 months ago, I decided I needed to do something just for me. My ex-husband always complained about traveling, saying it was a waste of money. Now that I was free from his negativity, I booked myself an all-inclusive trip to Tenerife. At 32, I figured it was time to learn how to enjoy my own company. The hotel was beautiful, right on the beach with palm trees swaying in the warm breeze. I've been looking forward to this trip for weeks, especially after the stress of dividing assets and dealing with lawyers. The all-inclusive package meant I wouldn't have to worry about finding restaurants or figuring out what to eat alone. I could just relax and focus on healing. What I didn't expect was the dining situation. Instead of normal tables where you could sit alone or with your group, this place had what they called club-style seating. Every table seated 8 people, and they mixed guests together randomly. The staff said it was to encourage community and conversation among guests. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I figured I could handle making small talk for a few meals. On my second night, I arrived at dinner early and got seated at an empty table. I ordered a glass of red wine and was looking forward to a peaceful meal. The wine arrived just as a family got seated at my table. There were 5 of them, 2 parents, and 3 kids who looked to be between 8 and 12 years old. The mother was a stern-looking woman with her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a conservative dress that covered her from neck to ankles. The father seemed quieter, constantly checking his phone and barely acknowledging anyone. The 3 kids sat perfectly still, hands folded in their laps like little statues. I smiled and nodded at them when they sat down, trying to be polite. The mother looked at my wine glass and then directly at me with a disapproving expression. The mother announced that she did not wish to expose her children to women drinking alcohol. Her tone was cold and judgmental. I took a sip of my wine and told her that this was an all-inclusive resort, and I was an adult guest enjoying a glass of wine with dinner. I suggested that if it bothered her, perhaps she could ask the hostess to move her family to another table. The father finally looked up from his phone and backed up his wife, saying that they didn't want their children seeing inappropriate behavior. I said that drinking wine with dinner was hardly inappropriate behavior and that I wasn't causing any disturbance. The mother then asked where my husband was, where my family was. She said that a proper woman doesn't drink alone in public. The way she said it made my cheeks burn. Here I was, finally doing something for myself after years of being controlled, and this stranger was judging me for it. I explained that I was traveling alone and that it was perfectly normal. I said I wasn't doing anything wrong. The mother responded by saying how sad it was that I was traveling alone, adding that no wonder I was drinking. The father chimed in, saying their children didn't need to see this kind of behavior and that I was setting a bad example. The kids just stared at me like I was some kind of exhibit at a zoo. Other guests at nearby tables started to notice the tension. I decided to take the high road and just ignore them. I would get my food and eat quickly. When I went to the buffet, I took my time selecting items, hoping they might cool down by the time I returned. The buffet had an amazing selection: fresh seafood, local specialties, and beautiful salads. I filled my plate and headed back to the table. When I approached, I noticed something was wrong immediately. My wine glass was gone, completely gone. Not moved to another spot, not empty, just vanished. I sat down and looked around the table. The family was all there, eating their food with innocent expressions. I asked where my wine glass had gone. The mother claimed she didn't know what wine glass I was talking about. The father said they hadn't seen any wine glass. This was unbelievable. They had obviously taken it, but they were lying to my face about it. Before I could say anything else, a waiter approached our table. The waiter apologized but said he needed to see my wristband. He explained that they had received a report that there was an underage guest at this table drinking alcohol without supervision. He said the family had told them I must have sneaked away from my parents. I stared at the waiter, then at the family. The mother was looking at her plate, but I could see a slight smirk on her face. The audacity was breathtaking. I told the waiter I was 32 years old and had checked in myself 3 days ago. I explained that this family had taken my wine glass while I was at the buffet and then reported me as underage to get me in trouble. The waiter looked embarrassed when he examined my wristband more closely. Our wristbands had our ages printed on them for exactly this reason. He apologized profusely, realizing I was clearly an adult guest, and said he would get me a fresh glass of wine immediately. When he walked away, I turned to face the family directly. I told them that what they had done was incredibly dishonest, that they had stolen my drink and then lied to the staff about me. The mother claimed they were protecting their children from my influence. The father said that maybe next time I would think twice before being so selfish. I asked how I was being selfish when I had been sitting there minding my own business. I pointed out that they were the ones who had caused all this drama. The waiter returned with a fresh glass of wine and set it down in front of me with another apology. Just when he left, the family returned from their own trip to the buffet. When the mother saw my new glass of wine, her face went white, then bright red. She demanded to know how I had gotten another drink, reminding me that they had told the staff I was underage. I confirmed that yes, they had lied about me to the staff, but I explained that the truth has a way of coming out. I pointed out that my wristband clearly showed my age, and the waiter had been very apologetic about their false report. The father looked uncomfortable now, looking around at the other tables where people were definitely watching our conversation. He said they were just trying to protect their children. I asked if they protected their children by stealing and lying, wondering what kind of example that was setting for their kids. The mother angrily told me not to dare lecture them about parenting. I said that I wasn't lecturing anyone, just pointing out the irony that they were worried about their children seeing me drink wine, but they were perfectly fine with them watching their parents steal and lie. Other guests were openly staring now. An older couple at the next table was shaking their heads in disapproval, clearly not at me. The mother realized they had an audience and her voice got quieter but more venomous. She said I had no idea what it was like to be responsible for children. I agreed that she was right, I didn't know what that was like, but I said I did know what it was like to be treated with basic respect, which was something she seemed to have forgotten. I took a deliberate sip of my wine and continued eating my dinner. The family ate in tense silence for the rest of the meal. When they finished, they got up to leave without saying another word. When they walked away, the older woman from the next table leaned over and praised me for standing up to them. She said some people think having children gives them the right to control everyone around them, and told me to enjoy my wine and vacation. I smiled and raised my glass to her. For the first time since my divorce, I felt truly proud of myself for standing up to bullies. The rest of my trip was peaceful, and I never saw that family in the dining room again. I can only assume they requested to eat at different times to avoid me. This happened about a year ago, and I still can't believe the nerve of some people. I'm 27, and back in college, I had this tight group of friends who all studied together, partied together, and basically lived in each other's pockets for 4 years. One of those friends was this sweet girl who was always the mom of the group, making sure everyone ate proper meals and got home safe after nights out. Last year, she died in a car accident. Just like that. One day she was texting in our group chat about weekend plans, and the next day we're all getting phone calls that she is gone. It was devastating. She was only 26, had just gotten engaged, and was planning her wedding. The whole thing felt surreal and wrong. The funeral was heartbreaking. Her parents were destroyed, her fiancé could barely stand, and all of us college friends were trying to hold each other up while falling apart ourselves. I hadn't seen most of these people in a couple years since we all scattered after graduation, but grief has a way of making everything else feel small. During college, there was this guy in our friend group who I had some weird tension with. We flirted a lot, hung out one-on-one sometimes, and there were definitely moments where it felt like something might happen between us. But it never did. He was always kind of intense, the type who would analyze every text message and read meaning into casual interactions. I liked him, but something about his energy always made me keep my distance romantically. He seemed like the type who would make a big deal out of everything. At the funeral, I saw him across the room during the service. He looked terrible, which made sense because we all did. After everything was over and people were starting to leave, I went over to say goodbye to a few people. When I got to him, he looked like he was barely holding it together. I asked him if he was doing okay and told him how sorry I was. He said he wasn't really okay and that he couldn't believe our friend was gone. I agreed that it didn't feel real. I gave him a hug. It lasted maybe 10 seconds. Just a normal, human, comforting hug between two people who were grieving the same loss. Then I hugged a couple other people and left. The next evening, I'm at home in my pajamas watching Netflix when I get a Facebook message from someone I don't recognize. The profile picture shows a middle-aged woman with short blonde hair and an aggressive smile. She introduced herself as his mother and said we needed to talk. I was confused because she didn't say whose mother she was. But then I looked at her last name and realized she was the mom of the guy I'd hugged at the funeral. I asked her what she wanted to talk about. She told me it was about how I was treating her son. She said he'd told her that I hugged him yesterday and that she thought I needed to understand something. I told her I had hugged him at our friend's funeral and asked what the problem was. She said the problem was that I was sending mixed signals. She claimed he'd been hurt by women like me before and that he didn't need me toying with his emotions right now. I literally stared at my phone for 5 minutes trying to process what I was reading. I asked her what she meant by women like me, explaining that it was just a hug at a funeral and we were both grieving. She told me not to play dumb and said he'd told her about our history together and how I'd led him on in college. She accused me of showing up and giving him hope again when he was vulnerable, calling it manipulative. I asked if she was serious, pointing out that our friend had just died and she was turning a consolation hug into some kind of romantic conspiracy. She said if I wasn't interested in dating him, then I needed to stay away from him completely. She demanded that I either commit to a relationship or leave him alone, claiming I was giving him false hope. At this point, I was getting angry. This woman was basically telling me that showing basic human compassion to someone at a funeral was somehow leading him on. I told her this was insane and that I wasn't responsible for managing her adult son's emotions. I explained that I hugged him because we were both sad about losing our friend. She said I was just like all the other girls who think they can play games with men's hearts. She called him sensitive and said he didn't need fake women pretending to care about him. I told her to lose my number and not contact me again. I blocked her immediately, but apparently that wasn't the end of it. The next day, one of my other college friends sent me a screenshot of a Facebook post that Karen had made. The post said that some people will use any excuse to manipulate others, even at funerals. She wrote that fake women who pretend to care are the worst kind of people, and that her son deserves better than game players who send mixed signals. She didn't tag me or use my name, but it was obviously about me. I was furious. This woman had taken a moment of genuine human connection during one of the saddest days any of us had experienced and twisted it into some kind of manipulative scheme. A few days later, the guy himself reached out to me. He apologized about his mom and said he had no idea she was going to contact me. I told him his mom thought I was some kind of predator because I hugged him at a funeral. He said he knew how it sounded and explained that she'd always been like this. He told me that ever since his dad left when he was 12, she'd been incredibly overprotective and thought every woman was going to hurt him. I pointed out that this wasn't normal behavior and that he was 27 years old. He agreed and said he'd been trying to get her to back off for years, but she didn't listen. He explained that he'd told her we were just friends and that the hug didn't mean anything romantic, but she got it in her head that I was trying to manipulate him. I asked if he'd told her about our college situation. He admitted that he'd mentioned we used to be close and that he'd had feelings for me back then. He said he thought it would help her understand why he was emotional about seeing me again, but he didn't think she'd take it and run with it like this. I told him he'd basically given her ammunition to come after me. He apologized again and said he never wanted this to happen. He explained that she'd made him tell her about the funeral and who was there, and when he mentioned me, she started asking all these questions. Part of me felt bad for him because it was clear his mother had some serious boundary issues, but I was still angry that her crazy behavior had somehow become my problem to deal with. I told him his mom had posted on Facebook calling me fake and manipulative. He seemed shocked and said he'd make her take it down right away. I told him not to bother because the damage was already done. He asked me not to judge him based on what she did and said that while we hadn't talked much since college, he'd like to stay friends. He made it clear he was just talking about friendship and wasn't looking for anything romantic. A week later, he messaged me again to let me know that he'd had a serious conversation with his mother about boundaries and that she'd agreed to stay out of his personal relationships going forward. He also said he'd made her delete the Facebook post. We're on decent terms now, but I still can't believe the audacity of that woman. She took one of the most emotionally difficult days of my life and made it about her son's non-existent love life. The idea that showing basic human kindness at a funeral somehow makes me manipulative is so beyond ridiculous that I still get angry thinking about it. What really gets me is that she called me fake for pretending to care. I genuinely cared about everyone at that funeral because we were all mourning someone we loved. The fact that she could look at that situation and see manipulation instead of grief tells me everything I need to know about the kind of person she is. I've been to several funerals since then, and I still hug people goodbye because that's what normal humans do when they're sad. But now I always wonder if someone's going to accuse me of having ulterior motives for showing basic compassion. It's exhausting that some people can't just let grief be grief without turning it into drama. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.